We're live and ready when we're
Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're going to call this public meeting to order, and I'm looking to council to see if there's any declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest tonight. Seeing none, we will move to item 3.1, which is the adoption of the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Cardy, seconded by Councillor Card, that the agenda of the public meeting of council on May 31st, 2022 be adopted as presented. Any discussion? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Carried. All righty, so that moves us to 4.1, which is a planning report on a zoning bylaw amendment application for Harvest Creek subdivision, and specific to lots 1 to 20 and blocks 21 and 22, and it's Plan 28M Mike. So our presenter tonight is our planner, Mr. Steve Pence. And with that, Steve, I don't see you on the screen there. I've got you now. Okay, we're going to pin you so that we can see you. All the verbs we've developed during COVID, right? Yeah, you're on mute. We're going to pin you. Anyway, let's just hear you. I haven't heard you yet, Steve. Are you good for volume?
Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Again, my name is Steve Pence. I'm a planning consultant with Novatech, and we provide planning services to the village of Westport. So I'm going to take a role here tonight in the public meeting by introducing the application, talking a little bit about how notice was given, some statements that we're required to read at public meetings for the benefit of those participating at the public meeting, and then a few preliminary comments on the application as presented. And so if I can get control of the screen here, please, I'm going to see if I can share. Okay. So does everybody see my screen now with the PowerPoint in front of you?
It's still in preview. Could you make it show slideshow? And it'll be bigger for us.
There, how's that?
Well, that's presenter's view, but it's better.
I'm not sure how I can make it any bigger. It's my full screen.
That's okay. It just shows us what's coming, but the presenter view is better than that.
Steve, I think once you're in it, if you go to view, you can toggle it. You start it.
Is it still visible?
Yep.
Not working very well for me. Kim, are you able to display it for me, please?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, I'll start it.
I'm going to. Boy, this is embarrassing.
Okay.
Stop share. There we go. That'll do it.
I got it back.
So Steve, you need to make me the host again for me to be able to share.
And to do that, I
You see my name at the top. It'll say more, and then it'll say make host.
Which is
I'll try to reclaim it, but sometimes that doesn't. Yeah, that worked.
there. I think, is that good to go?
Yep.
My apologies for that technical annoyance, but in any event, we're here where we need to be. So This is a statutory public meeting under the Planning Act under Section 34 in relation to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment application in the Village of Westport. Notice of this public meeting was given by first-class prepaid mail in accordance with the Regulation 54606 under the Planning Act to all prescribed agencies, and by publishing a newspaper advertisement in the May 12th, 2022 edition of the Review Mirror. In addition, notice of this public meeting was also posted on the village's municipal website. Any person wanting further notice of the decision on the passing of the proposed amendment should contact the clerk by making a written decision if they haven't done so already. To date, the village is in receipt of written comments from the Upper Rideau Lake Association, from the RVCA, as well as from the United Counties. Next slide, please. Any person may make written or verbal representation either in support of or in opposition to the application. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Village of Westport to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Village of Westport before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Village of Westport before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So just as a reminder, while your written submission may be accepted anytime up to and before a decision is made by council, the village strongly encourages those wishing to submit comments to do so at their earliest possible convenience, so that these comments may be taken under consideration in making a decision. Next slide, please. So this is more of the sort of the meat and potatoes of the application. What you have before you is the key map showing the subject lands that relate to approximately 2.19 hectares of land situated within the Harvest Creek subdivision, and specifically on lots 1 to 20 and blocks 21 to 22 on the registered plan of subdivision. The application applies to a total of 25 lots, lots 21 to 20 and blocks 21 to 22. The two blocks were divided by lifting part lot control to create 5 lots. So that's why we come to a total of 25 lots that are affected by this amendment. The subject lands are designated in the village official plan as residential, and they are currently zoned R1 and R2 in the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So the purpose in effect of this amendment, the purpose of the amendment is to change the zoning on the subject lands from residential type 1 and residential type 2 to residential type 1 exception and residential type 2 special exception. The effect of this amendment would be to bring already constructed homes into conformity with the bylaw and to apply the exceptions across the development to accommodate the remaining homes to be constructed. As part of this amendment, there were 3 exceptions applied for. The first exception was relating to lot coverage. For the R1 and R2 zone, the maximum permitted lot coverage is limited to 35%. Some of both the existing and planned construction exceeds the maximum permitted lot coverage of 35%, while other dwellings that have yet to be constructed would be close to 35% when they are constructed. And that wouldn't allow for further development such as decks and small garden sheds. The applicant is proposing to increase, the applicant is proposing to amend the bylaw by increasing the maximum permitted lot coverage on the subject lands from 35 to 60% in order to bring the non-conformances into zoning conformity and to provide a buffer for those other lots that are yet to be developed to allow for minor accessory structures such as decks and small garden sheds. The second amendment, the second component of the amendment rather, is to deal with porch encroachments. Section 3.6.7.4 of the zoning bylaw allows unenclosed porches, balconies, and steps to project a maximum distance of 2.5 meters into a required yard setback area, but not closer than 2.5 meters from the interior lot line. Some of both the existing and planned homes do not meet the performance standard, as some porches are as close as 1.2 meters from the interior lot line. Therefore, the applicant is proposing a bylaw amendment to reduce the required setback for unenclosed porches, balconies, and steps from 2.5 to 1.2 in order to allow the structures to conform as constructed. And finally, the third exception is to deal with driveway widths. The zoning bylaw allows for a maximum driveway width of 6 meters, whereas many of the driveways that were constructed as wide as 6.4 meters. So it's a small increase as a result of paving the width of the driveway to the width of the garage. So it's a common practice to see that happen. But essentially the amendment is to allow for a minor exception to a wider driveway from 6 meters to 6.4 meters. So that's sort of a brief presentation over what the application proposes. And so I will turn this now back to the mayor and allow for a presentation by the applicant, and then to take questions from anybody that wishes to address the village and or the applicant.
Thank you very much, Steve. Great presentation. I just have one clarifying question that will probably help the discussion. Registered plan of subdivision 28 M-20. What we saw the map, but understandably it's a little difficult for us to see. And we know that the developer has a lot of property. This amendment tonight is in relation to the homes currently built. Just can you answer that question for us?
The amendment applies to the residential lots that were registered as part of the Harvest Creek subdivision last year. So it's 25 lots. There's 20 residential lots, and then there were 2 blocks that were divided by part lot control to create 5. And so for a total of 25 lots, all in Harvest Creek subdivision.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Just wanted to be clear. I know my people here were squinting to see the map. So I'm going to turn it open to questions. I know that Steve's representing the village, also available to answer questions, I guess at your discretion. Steve is the planner for the developer, for Mr. Rolston. Mike Keane is on, and I also saw some of the staff from Watercolor. So I'd like to open up questions, first of all, to my council, and then we'll go to the public. So does any member of council have a question? Councillor Card and then Councillor Carney.
In reading over our bylaws, zoning bylaws, and requests for these changes, initially when you read through it, it looks like a lot of little things, but when you add them all up, it impacts a good portion of our existing bylaw as it applies to that subdivision. Like I have no problem with the 1.3 feet for the laneway. That's here and there. As a foot or two wouldn't be anywhere else, but nearly a 100% increase in lot coverage. That sounds kind of drastic. In looking at some of the other zoning bylaws around here, as much as I could find in such a short period of time, 45% seemed to be the max that I could find, and that included any buildings and encroachments on anything that would be considered lot coverage. So I'm just wondering how we got so separated from the initial plan here to build these homes and place them on the lots. It just seems that increase that we're being asked to consider seems extreme in my mind. If you take the encroachments, we're looking at not just lot coverage, but we're looking at the rest of the things that will go with it. So, what is this, a cascading thing? Does it one follow the other? If we look through setbacks and lot coverage, what do we end up with here? It's my opinion that we should, in consultation with our planner and Mr. Olson's planner, we should take another look at this and see if we can come up with some kind of a median solution here.
So how did we get here? I mean, Steve, I'll let you jump in a minute, but how did we get here? And I'm sure that the people are wondering how did this happen? When our new CAO started, and the building permits were, of course, they come to the CAO. Kim's always been very frank with us as council that she has many strengths. Planning is an area that she would want to depend on the planner. And so when the first building permit came in, she contacted Mr. Pence, and there was an issue that he identified right away, which you use the word cascading, so I wanted to come back to that, which caused a cascading of an audit to be done on the building permits already approved and buildings erected and future. So that's just more to give context. There was no will intent, but when Kim started, it got clarified at that point in time, and now we're all on board. So the challenges, some of the things that are before us tonight are to resurrect for buildings that are occupied and for a few remaining. And so I think, Steve, that's where Councillor Card is going, is 60% overall seems like a large whopping amount. Isn't there a way that it can be broken down a little tighter for what the needs are of the lots?
Absolutely, and I can answer part of those questions, and I might in fact ask Mike Keene to speak to it as well on behalf of his client. Certainly a 60% from 35 would seem like a fairly sizable increase in lot coverage, where in fact my understanding is that many of those lots don't need 60%. They don't need near 60% lot coverage. Many of them probably would be satisfied with something just marginally over 35 to allow for them to be in conformity and for them to allow for minor decks and small decks and garages, or sorry, sheds. A couple of the building permits, as I understand, were issued that would translate into lot coverages into the 45-ish range. So those are a couple of exceptions. But my understanding is that the application will be revised to ask for a lesser maximum percentage to bring it more closer to the standard of 35. And that would deal with the non-conformances and sort of allow for development to continue. On the porch encroachment matter, I would say that to me, there seems to be a bit of an inherent problem in the zoning bylaw standards relating to porch encroachments. The bylaw allows for a 1.2 meter side yard for the building as of right, but it doesn't allow any porches to get any closer than 2.5 meters. So the amendment really is to clarify that sort of inconsistency, if you will, so that porches can extend into the side yard on a basis that would be equivalent or consistent with the side yard standard for the main building. So that's actually would be a good thing to bring uniformity. And it's really, I think, it's a bit of a flaw in the bylaw as it stands today. So that is a sort of a technical amendment, I would say, but it's necessary in this case so that those homes constructed with those porches does comply. I'm not sure, Mike, if you want to add anything to that from your perspective, but I think from the village's perspective, I think there's a way to work together to bring a bylaw forward that would deal with the issues in a sort of a meaningful and practical way, yet still allow for development to continue on a sort of a good planning basis.
Through you, Mayor Jones, and thank you, Steve, for the opportunity. Again, absolutely no ill intent here. We first realized on this development that we had this porch issue because porches align with the front of the house. So we realized we had an issue with all of the porches because they're built to the same setback as the house. That triggered the audit where we actually went in and looked at every single house that was built, and we looked at all the performance standards And as has already been said, we found what I refer to as anomalies. And I want to assure council, this is not abnormal. This happens every place where both Steve and I work. I'm pretty confident he would agree with that. So it's not uncommon to have to come back and correct things that are missed throughout the process. So in doing that review, we have 4 lots out of the 25 that exceed 40%. We have a couple that are between the 35 and 40, and then the majority that meet. So when you look at our development overall, the coverage is 32%. And in a case like Westport and many municipalities, you have fairly basic zoning, and you have setbacks, and you have coverage requirements. You know, in hindsight, maybe we should have just written a whole new zone for the subdivision that would have just been modern standards. These are always hindsight's 2020. So as was mentioned by Mr. Pence, we'll just work with the village to more precisely tighten up the request. So what I had sought when I wrote this was to match the zoning that we're seeking on the adjacent development, which is not approved and is not even reviewed at this point. I was just going after a consistency piece by trying to apply provisions across all of the watercolor at Westport developments. We've since had an engineer review who's confirmed that we are well within the design standards that they planned for this development. So we'll continue to work with the village to refine the zoning so that it's clear that we're not seeking a doubling of coverage in this development. Thank you for the opportunity.
So, do you want me to follow up to him? So thanks very much. Mike, could you just be a little clearer for us and for people who are watching? Is your plan to come back with a amended proposal that is multi-lot, so that there's no blanketing? You probably got a pretty good indication of where you thought you were going to go in the next stage as well. So maybe this is all for good. But we understand that you're going to come back with something that really breaks these lots down, because we don't mind doing, of course, the work of passing several amendments. But I don't think you're going to get a lot of support if we don't see the work that really represents what the need is to have them to finish the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to you, Madam Mayor, that's basically what we've talked about, realizing that this is we wanted to get through the public meeting tonight to hear from council, to hear from people. So we recognized by comments coming in that people were concerned that we're doubling the density of the development, which I hope people hear is absolutely not the case. We're sitting at an average of 32%. So basically, from this point forward, from a process perspective, I hear the comments, your planner, Steve, hears the comments, and I will redraft what I've presented, taking the public comments into account. Your planner will review it, tweak it, whatever the case might be, so that when we come back for approval, it takes into account those public comments and deals with those details. So what I would expect is I was going for a text amendment only. So a broad brush across all 25 lots, apply the same rules. So I went with the biggest number necessary for the one lot that's sitting at 48% coverage. So now that we've dug in deeper, there's 4 that are over 40. So we'll do a map that says, these 4 lots are 52%, whatever we come up with your planner. And then maybe these lots are 40%, and these other lots that are well under 35 just stay at 35. So it'll be really broken down in detail to assure this council that there will never be a doubling of density in this development.
All right, thank you. That was a great explanation, both answered my question and in the next step. So I think you probably answered more questions than you realized there, Mike. Councillor Cardy wants in, no?
My question's answered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just the 60%, so thank you.
All right, so coming to the public, any
I have-
sorry, Councillor Roberts, go
I
ahead.
have a couple questions, and this reveals my lack of understanding of a lot of this development stuff. Interior lot line simply means the lot line between structures, between properties. Is that correct, Mike?
Steve.
I can answer that. The interior refers to the lot lines typically that run between the homes on the side. Most of the lots, if you think of them as being square, there might be a few irregular shaped lots, but most of them are rectangular. The front lot line has a front, has a rear, and then two side lot lines. The interior are the ones that run along the side lot lines.
Thanks. Second question. What is roughly the average lot size among these 25 homes?
Just quick math. Most of the lots are about 30 meters in depth and have about 15 meters of frontage. So 30 times 15 equals, they're 450 square meters or so. And the 3 or 4 lots within the 2 blocks that were included, they're much larger lots because they were originally designed for I think they were for apartment complex. And so when those lots were divided up, they're irregular pie-shaped lots, so they have really large rear yards. So those lots are much larger.
Did you want
One other final question. The largest garden shed I understand, according to bylaws I've read before, is 10 by 10 feet. Is that correct?
My understanding of the building code is that a garden shed under 10 by 10 would not require a building permit. Still required to meet zoning compliance, but without a building code, it's a little harder to control and enforce.
Okay.
Did you want to dive in?
Yes. I have trouble sometimes with written descriptions of a lot of these things. Could you possibly provide us with a diagram of possibly where the non-conforming structures are? I could better understand this if I had that in front of me.
Right. That's and what Mike was referring to in his text amendment versus an amendment with a schedule. On the schedule, it could identify the lots that would be granted a higher percentage, if you will. So you'd see all the lots with some of them given a 35% maximum and some of them given a 45% maximum. And that would identify the exceptions that apply to those particular lots. So we can do something like that in our report that we present to you for consideration to break out how that bylaw would be structured.
Thanks.
Councillor Brady.
We understand that this is phase 1 of the subdivision, and we're doing all of these amendments and changing things around. When we get into phase 2, will that all be looked after, or will we be sitting here doing this again during phase 2, or will they have accommodated the proper size lots and buildings by then?
So I'm going to jump in there. That's a great question, but the public meeting tonight is really about what's in front of us. So great question, but probably too soon for them to answer, and we have to kind of stay on the agenda. Councillor Carter.
Yes, one more question. I understand that 10 by 10 utility shed or whatever would not require a building permit. But what would the allowance be for an outbuilding? A lot of places say 10%. I meant to look it up in our zoning bylaw, but I didn't have time. So do we have a maximum allowable percentage of coverage, lot coverage for an outbuilding? And if we do, does it come under the umbrella of total coverage for the lot?
There is a the lot coverage provision of 35% includes total lot coverage of buildings and structures. So that would include the main building, including the attached garage, of course, as well as any decks, as well as detached accessory structures. I'm just looking quickly in the zoning bylaw here to see if there's a lot coverage. It says accessory buildings are subject to a maximum of 10% of the lot area. So there is a provision, and that applies more to really much larger lots where you could have larger buildings that would take up a significant portion of the property. On these small lots, the governing provision would be the total lot coverage.
Thank you. Anybody from the public have a question?
Phil Washer.
Can't see the name.
Phil Washer.
Oh, good. Hello, Phil. How are you? Go ahead, please. You have a question or a comment?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. I work for Rideau Valley Conservation, and I'm here on behalf of Mike Yee, who couldn't be in attendance tonight. I just wanted to say that I think it sounds like the direction that things are going is that there may be a subsequent meeting where we'll get some more details. I had a chance to speak with the applicant today and understand a little bit more. Our primary concern was not to do with the porches or the side lot lines, but to do with the lot coverage increase. We did receive at 4:22 p.m. A memo from McIntosh Perry, the engineering firm, about their opinion about the increase in lot coverage. So I think we'll need a little bit of time to go through that. But once we've had a chance to go through that and then probably see a bit of a further refinement that's forthcoming, we'll be in a better position to provide an indication of whether our office could support it, because with just the number 60, we were not in a position to support. So I guess all that's to say, it sounds like things are moving in the direction of no decision being made tonight and just receiving comments. And so that's certainly something that the RVCA would support here tonight. I can answer any questions if needed, but I think that's all I need to say.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. If there's any questions, we'll come back to you, but it's important for council and the public to hear the RVCA's position on it. I don't see any other questions, so it feels like
From Mark Parliament.
okay, Mark, you got a question? Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. I actually have a statement I'd like to read, if that's permissible.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Mark Parliament, and I live at 29 Main Street here in the village. I'm here today to speak against this zoning bylaw amendment. As a former owner of an HVAC company, I know the amount of research and analysis that a builder does to ensure that a build is financially viable. Before this decision to build a house or develop a subdivision is made, a diligent builder and their team completes comprehensive research, studies the land itself, location of the lands, communities the land is located in, building code requirements, as well as any potential roadblocks such as local bylaws. The lot sizes were well known to this builder, deciding on the size of the houses they were to build on those lots. The Village of Westport's zoning bylaw came into effect in 2008 and is readily available for anyone to read. So one can only assume that this builder in question either failed to do his due diligence or he chose to disregard the bylaw and didn't conform with the design he had in mind for the new subdivision. I feel that this is a situation where the builder is deciding it was easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, as the zoning bylaw change request should have been made before a shovel was even put in the ground. The zoning bylaw amendment he's asking for has the potential to create a divide within the village where one side is allowed to have wider driveways, larger lot coverages, and smaller setbacks than the other. This can potentially lead us to an old versus new Westport, similar to what happened during the initial expansion in Milton. The council is quick to send letters to residents demanding removal of anything they deem to break a bylaw. If their demands are not met, they're usually a visit from the bylaw officer and additional letters threatening legal action. Yet this builder was able to develop an entire subdivision, knowingly breaking the zoning bylaw. Instead of a letter demanding that he conform, he's allowed to ask for a special meeting to request a zoning amendment and ensure that his building legally conforms to a new bylaw after the fact. Why is this builder treated any different than any other resident in the village? It's not the council's responsibility to ensure that the developer builds a profitable subdivision. It's this council's job to look after the well-being of the whole village. The developer came to the Westport and pitched the idea of a walking community and now has only adding sidewalks to one side of the street. Those keeping score, this translates to the ability to incorporate more lots into the subdivision, and the size of the lots were clearly marked at this point. More lots equals more homes to sell and more profit. I'm not against the builder making a profit, but I am against them getting special treatment from this council. If this council truly believes that encroachments and zoning amendments are okay, then change the zoning bylaw for every property within the village of Westport. This way, if a Westport resident, no matter where their lot is located, would like to have 60% lot coverage, they would legally permitted to do so. In the submitted proposal, the planner emphasizes that most homes in this development are on bungalows, which typically have larger footprints than multi-story homes. The builder knew this when he built them on the current lot list anyway. It's the builder's responsibility to be aware and understand and adhere to the existing zoning bylaws, or ask for variances prior to building. If he did not do his due diligence or chose to simply ignore the bylaw, he should not now be able to simply ask for forgiveness and have the rules changed to suit his needs. I urge his council to deny this zoning bylaw amendment and hold the builder to the same set of rules as every other resident in the village, or make a formal amendment to the zoning bylaw to benefit every single property owner in Westport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Bob Thompson is next. Go ahead, Bob.
I think I've unmuted now. Have you got me?
I got you. Go ahead.
And no dogs barking today. We've been here before. I guess what I wanted to speak to is really the issue of concern to me is the lot coverage. And yes, I agree that the sudden jump from 35 to 60 is alarming. And I've got a couple of concerns about that. Number one, how did it happen? And clearly, to me, somebody dropped the ball. We can't say that we can go back and redo it. I guess you probably can, but I don't think that's the appropriate solution. Now, I've heard what Watercolor has to say about their new proposal and the way they do it, and I think Mike is doing exactly the right thing to say we need to redraft the bylaw so that it only applies, and this is my point, to those that do not conform to the existing bylaw. And that's what I think Mike was proposing to do. My concern is that the remedy to this situation be the best for Westport. And I have some concerns about site coverage for an area that used to have 0% as a farm going to 60% as a quasi-urban development. That's quite a bit, and it has implications for stormwater runoff and a whole bunch of other things. So I guess my question, I have two questions to be considered by Mike and others and council. Is a bylaw amendment the appropriate way to deal with this? I know that there are variances possible. Perhaps maybe this is more appropriate for dealing with this problem. My concern is that there are about 9 of the existing 25 lots that may or may come very close to not conforming to the existing bylaw. I'm concerned for the remaining lots and all of the rest of the development that whatever is approved to deal with those 9 problematic, but they have been called anomalies, but they're contraventions to the bylaw. To deal with those, I wouldn't want to see the same solution just broadcast over the remainder of the development or elsewhere in Westport without some very serious consideration by both council and the developer. So that's I guess what I'm saying. Site coverage is a concern, particularly in view of the valuable resource we have on our lake and its impact on the lake. And I'm not certain that this move from 0% to 60% site coverage is going to improve the quality of our lake. And I guess I will leave it right there.
Okay. Phil, did you want to make a comment? Because that's sort of the role of one of the roles of the Conservation Authority. And no, I don't need you to address yes or no, but what role does the Conservation Authority play in this process to take care of the concerns that Mr. Thompson just raised?
So normally I'm not unfortunately familiar with all of the details of the subdivision, how we've got here to date. So I can't speak to the specifics of this application, but what I can say is that our role is through an agreement, memorandum of understanding with the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, that when subdivisions are being created and developed, that we do review stormwater management reports on their behalf. And we're looking at things such as stormwater quantity and stormwater quality. And there's standards that are set through provincial guidance about how a subdivision is able to develop. And then, an engineer presumably will come up with a system or solution that will address all the quantity and quality concerns from the guidance. I know through some correspondence with Mike that he had that same concern that the gentleman had just raised about water quality. Where it comes in with this zoning amendment, typically we don't have that same peer review function to the counties, but we of course have an interest. And where there's been a subdivision that's been approved on the basis of a certain kind of a stormwater system, we are always looking to make sure that any change or deviation from the original is going to be consistent with the stormwater management system in terms of quantity and quality. And so that's our primary role in this type of an application, is just to kind of, again, provide that review. And we have not had the ability to do that at this time, but we did receive the new information. So we will continue to work towards that role to be able to provide the town with the village with the best information that they can have to proceed forward.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's important for you to speak up there because you are an independent third party with the experience and expertise to perform that role. Did you want to sum up then, Steve? It looks like there's no more questions. Anything else that you'd like to say, or we can close the public meeting, or Mike or Kevin?
I have nothing further to add. I look at this as an opportunity here from the public. Public meetings are important for residents to make their comments. So I'm glad we've heard some comments from those. And unless the applicant has anything further to add, I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Steve. Mike, did you want to say anything, or you're good?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't have anything further to add. The comments tonight are what I expected folks to say, particularly from some of the written comments we've received this week. I'm grateful that people come out, and I'll continue to work with your planner to refine this bylaw. And that sounds like what we need to do so that it's very clear where the changes are. I would just add the point about, there was a point raised about variance versus zoning bylaw. The reason we apply a zoning bylaw over a variance is because the variance is a spot in time. So we could do a variance and recognize exactly what has been built, but that would mean that if those owners came back and said, I do want to build a shed, they have to come back before you and do another variance. So we'd like to provide a little bit of flexibility for people to add that deck or that back garden shed due to coverage. So that's why we're seeking a broader amendment, and we will tighten it right up because that's what we're hearing we need to do. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. First of all, thank you to the public. Your comments are very important. And even though we're still doing public meetings by Zoom, you were heard. Obviously, as you likely also watched the heads of the planners, particularly Mike Keane, you saw that he was paying close attention. So thank you very much for taking the time tonight. And to the applicant, thank you for being here, Kevin and Stephen and Michael. And to our own planner, thank you very much. We're going to let you folks go, and we'll just carry on with the rest of our business.
Thank you.
So we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is to accept the report. So it's moved by Councillor Card, seconded by Councillor Cardy. The council received the planning report prepared by Novatech on the zoning bylaw amendment to the Harvest Creek subdivision. So we're accepting the report only. All in favor? Carried. Very good. And the next is to move to any questions from the public or from the media. That's a question we accept the meeting. We're not in closed session now, are we? No. All right, so that's good. So we're just going to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Cardy, seconded by Councillor Card, that the public meeting of the Council of the Village of Westport adjourn at 6:17 p.m. All in favor?